Microsoft has a new tiny little computer. It's called the Surface Go, you may have heard of it, and it's ready to take on the iPad. Or maybe it's ready to take on Chromebooks. Or maybe it's just a really little Surface Pro. You know what? Here's a question. What is this thing designed to compete with? All right, so this is the Surface Go, and as you can see, it looks quite a lot like just a little tiny baby Surface Pro. Now, they're not exactly the same, of course, and I'm gonna get into the differences. And before I get started, I'm gonna say that this is not a review yet. We've only had this thing for a couple of days, but I do have some thoughts, so let's start with the hardware. Now, if you're familiar with the Surface Pro hardware, you know exactly what to expect here. It's just smaller, but some of the edges are a little bit more curved, which makes sense for how small this thing is. It is a little bit thicker than an iPad Pro, which is kind of a bummer, but it makes sense. This is a full PC after all. The screen is 1800 by 1200, and it's nice, but it feels, I don't know, a little bit cramped because the bezels are really huge to make space for the Windows Hello camera, and also, I don't know, they're just really huge. The kickstand, it's great. It's a standard Surface kickstand. It works at pretty much any angle, and I don't know, you can use it on your lap just fine. In terms of ports, the big one, the one I'm most excited about, is USB-C. Hooray! If you use an Android phone, you can use that charger to charge this thing, although it won't charge super quick with that. You're better off using the charger that comes with it, which uses this little Surface connector. Now, unfortunately, this doesn't have a standard USB-A port, and the Surface connector here doesn't have one on it either, unlike on the Surface Pro, which is a little bit of a bummer, but whatever, get a dongle. There's also a micro SD card slot for expanding the storage, which I'm really happy about. And last but not least, there is a headphone jack. Oh, sorry, there's one more connector, and that is the keyboard connector on the bottom for connecting it to the Surface keyboard, so we should talk about that. As with the Surface Pro, there is a Surface type cover designed specifically for this computer. You have to buy it separately though. It's 130 bucks, and it's designed for this thing, which means that it's really, really small, just like this computer. But Microsoft did a pretty good job making the keys go edge to edge, so although it is a little bit cramped, I got used to typing on it in just a couple of hours. It's actually pretty much fine. It has really good key travel, much better than a MacBook, and I like the touchpad. It's not very big because this computer's so small, but it works really well and I haven't had any problems with it. Overall, I really like this hardware, but I have to admit that I have a soft spot for tiny computers, and this is just a tiny little cute computer. So, you know, I kind of love it. Build quality though, it's really good. The magnesium is solid, and it might be a little bit more plasticky in its finish than the Surface Pro, but whatever. It runs Windows 10, which means that it can do more than a Chromebook, and you're probably able to be a little bit more productive than you could be on an iPad. It's a little Surface, so cool, we're done here. We're not done here. No, we got to talk about price and specs, because you know what? That's where things get a little bit weird. So the base model of the Surface Go costs $399, and for that you get an Intel Gold 4415Y processor. That's a relatively new processor, but it's also pretty low end, so you're not going to be able to do super intensive stuff on this thing. It also comes with 64 gigs of storage, and here's the issue, only 4 gigs of RAM, which for most people isn't enough to do the stuff that they want to do on Windows. Now, that RAM situation might not be that bad if you leave this thing in its default state, which is running Windows 10 S Mode, the version of Windows that can only run Windows Store apps, but turning it off is really easy, and I think most people do because you can't get the apps you want, like Chrome, 1Password, and the Amazon Kindle app. I have lots of feelings about S Mode, and there's not time to get into them in this video. Anyway, I think most people are going to want to get the upgraded version, which costs $549 and comes with the same processor, 128 gigs of storage, and 8 gigs of RAM. And that's the version I've been testing for the past day, and for basic stuff, it's actually been pretty fast, and that RAM means that I can have a bunch of stuff open. But that brings me back to the price. The right Surface Go, I think, for most people is the upgraded model, which costs, again, 550 bucks plus $130 for the keyboard. That is $680, not accounting for the Surface Pen if you want that, which costs an extra 100 bucks. I'm not saying that I think this thing is too expensive. I mean, after all, an iPad Pro with a smart keyboard starts at a little over 800 bucks, and at $680 you can get a pretty decent Windows laptop. I feel like buying a computer in this price range, it just turns out there's no easy answers. The bottom line for me is buying this new kind of device in this price category is surprisingly complicated. As a new kind of device that's trying to do a newish thing in computers, I think the Surface Go is really intriguing, but I do wonder if it kind of falls in this weird middle zone. So, okay, I'm a middle child, I don't know if you can tell, and being a middle child sometimes kind of sucks. The big kids get to do all the cool stuff, and the little kids, they get all the attention, and the middle kids, they just constantly have to prove themselves, and the Surface Go, it has to prove itself. At the end of the day, I do think the Surface Go falls in a very similar category to the iPad Pro. It could serve as your main computer, but definitely not for everybody. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Like I said, I'm going to be reviewing this thing, so let me know in the comments what you'd like me to test, and I'll try and fit it into the review. And one quick note, sometime in the near future, we're going to take a break from making these episodes because, I don't know, we're a little bit tired, but I promise you we will be back.